Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Accessing Equity in Recovery Spaces. It's a panel discussion listening session, and we are excited to be here and looking forward to a lively discussion and hearing your thoughts on equity and access in recovery spaces. My name is Lynette Cashew Davis, and I am going to be one of your panelists. And I am the co-chair of the DEI training subcommittee of the Inclusivity Caucus, which is a project of the Recovery Advocacy Project. And one of the things that we try to do is provide information and education to folks in the Inclusivity Caucus, the RAP Recovery Advocacy Project, and the folks nationwide who are a part of each of the state organizing teams. We try to provide information about diversity, equity, and inclusion, those issues that affect folks with substance use disorder, mental illness, and other issues. So we are providing this opportunity to hear from you and your experiences and your concerns and your questions about these issues. We have a panel of folks who are going to join me in discussing some issues. Along with myself, we have Tom Jackson and Stancil Tootle. And each of us are a member, excuse me, of the Inclusivity Caucus and members of the DEI Training Subcommittee. So I neglected to introduce myself properly by saying my name is Lynette Cashew Davis. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a person in long-term recovery from substance use disorder, which for me means I haven't used drugs or alcohol since May 4th of 2007. I'm also a recovery advocate here in Columbus, Ohio, both locally in Franklin County, statewide in Ohio, and I volunteer with the Recovery Advocacy Project. And so now we're going to move forward, just get started by asking some questions. We've broken our event down into 3 areas. We'd like to ask you some questions about issues around substance use disorder and co-occurring disorders such as mental illness, TBI, or other issues that folks may have issues around. We're also going to discuss racial issues, race, ethnicity, and religion, and issues of access concerning folks with substance use disorder and those issues. And finally, we want to discuss substance use disorder and physical disabilities or other kinds of disabilities that folks are encountering. We're going to start with my friend Tom Jackson, who's going to share a little bit about himself and then ask some questions of you. I want to say you can feel free to speak your questions out loud. Just raise your hand so our friend Garrett, who is our technical guru right now, can unmute you, or you're welcome to put your questions in the chat and we will try to follow along to get them. Thanks. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Lynette. Hi, everybody out in Facebook Live world. I've never done a Facebook Live before, so this is a new experience. So my name is Tom Jackson. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a person in long-term recovery from both substance use and mental health disorders, challenges, issues, which means I haven't had a drink or a drug since May 13th, 1991. And my last psychiatric hospitalization was on August 8th, 2009. And so co-occurring issues are something I've lived with for really pretty much my entire life. If I go back all the way to my earliest substance use, I was self-medicating depression, anxiety, some trauma, and so on. And so it's, for me, the two are just equal parts of who I am. My day job is as a registered peer recovery specialist at a state psychiatric hospital in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. where I work a lot with people with co-occurring conditions, both helping some of them get to treatment programs that are far more appropriate than state hospitals are for the issues they confront, and then also for people who have been there for quite a while and getting them to recovery housing in particular. That's who I am, and I want to hear who you are. So I have two questions, and you can address them together if you'd like, or we can talk about the first one some and see how far we get with that, and then throw the second one out there. A little bit of history. When I started working in community mental health 21 years ago, not long before that, if somebody came into the center that I worked at and had both a mental health condition, serious mental health condition, and were using substances, they were told to go get clean on their own for 30 days and come back and we'll treat your mental health condition. That was probably on the order of 25 years ago. That was pretty much the standard. A recent research study that I learned about in a training class I did recently from University of Pennsylvania shows that people who have a substance use disorder, about 2/3 also have some kind of co-occurring mental health condition, and vice versa. And those of us who work in the recovery world probably would say anecdotally it's closer to 80% or a little bit over. So if you experience both those things together, you're in good company, because there's a whole heck of a lot of us out there. So first question, what challenges and what successes have you had in recovery, finding recovery services? And then you can talk about how you've experienced stigma, and how you and where you have sought recovery services have either helped you overcome the stigma or stigmatized you, and made your journey to recovery even more difficult. We want to find some commonality, some issues that we can collectively address, both as we work on our state teams. I'm also a very proud member of the Virginia state organizing team of RAP. So, as Garrett said, please raise your hand and he will unmute you if you would like to share some experience with us. And this is being recorded, so we don't have to take notes, fortunately, because I have a hard time talking and writing at the same time.
So I'm going to unmute Rita.
Hi, Rita.
You should see an option to unmute yourself now, Rita.
Hi, group. My name is Rita. I have a recovery date of September 1992. I actually stopped using methadone 45 years ago. Didn't know alcohol was a drug. Didn't know some of the pills I was taking. I found that out early on, but not alcohol. I came in kind of the back doors of the rooms. I didn't know anything about 12-step programs. I was 27 years old with a 5-year-old child, married to an addict. And when he was 16, we put him in a rehab. And that's where I learned about, by taking him and other guys in his group, it was in Springfield, Virginia, to an NA meeting. And that's when I saw all the sayings on the walls and all the steps and all the traditions. And when he got out of the rehab 18 months later, he did go back to using with his father less than a year later, which I didn't know for a long time. But I started going to meetings. I met a friend. I started going to Al-Anon. I got clean with a psychiatrist, which is unusual because you always hear they don't know anything about addiction. This was a very hip guy. he was a genius. He had the key to my soul. You know, he taught me how to act like a woman and not acting like a child. I know my internet connection says it's unstable. If you can't hear me and you point to your ear, I'll turn off my video because sometimes it draws from the audio. And so years later, I started going to NA, AA, whatever. And I always practice the first step every single day. There are times when I have felt like committing suicide in the past 29 years. There have been times when I've extremely frustrated, miserable, like everybody else with their stories. We're basically, you know, we're each unique, but we're basically the same. And what kept me going was I detox from methadone and sleeping pills called Placidils, and I never wanted to go back to that. The pain, physical, mental, emotional pain of that was horrific, and I never wanted to go back to that. As years went on, maybe a decade or more later, that was not the reason that I stayed clean every day, and it's not the reason now. I just I have been a dancer most of my life. I taught, I performed a little. I worked as a center director for a large weight loss company for 21 years, and I retired at 66, 67, about 4 or 5 years ago. And now I'm working as a peer support specialist for a place in Pikesville, Maryland, at the umbrella is called Prolog. I work for Marlog for people, you know, with mental illness. And even though in the rooms I heard, you know, my disease is me, you know, that the drugs are a symptom of my disease. And I come to believe it more and more. The more I look back on my childhood and teenage years, I can see the different types of mental disabilities that I had, which really went untreated. And my mother was a high functioning alcoholic. And you didn't talk about those things. She didn't want any of her friends to know that my son had, you know, gotten into recovery, and didn't want anybody to know about me. And I wouldn't let anybody at work know. Until so many years later, there was a woman I really got close with, who worked in a psychiatric hospital and had a daughter in AA and knew about
Rita, could you hear us?
Rita, I just had to mute you. You're breaking
more.
Carol, it's lagging. I muted her,
Okay.
but it's lagging.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to Stephen. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Rita. We'll put it
Thanks.
in the chat. If you have a
Thanks, Rita.
question, just add the question.
Thanks. Stephen.
Stephen, you should be.
Oh, my name is Stephen Awkward.
Whoops.
Yep. You remuted. Stephen, you're muted.
Stephen, you might need to hit unmute again. There you go.
Hi, Stephen Awkward here. I work within the cultural recovery field up here in Maine. The issue that I really see in front of us in this state is that the state of Maine refuses to adhere to federal treaty when it comes to dealing with our indigenous communities. In light of the current circumstances, situations arising with residential schools and just the overall wellness of our indigenous communities due to substance use disorder, opiate use disorder, alcohol use disorder, there seems to be a large inequality with being able to get funding on a state level to develop cultural recovery within our state. Currently, I am one of the members of MIRAP, who is helping to develop our LD 1172, which is our attempt to bring the opioid settlement money out of general fund into its own personal account. And we're having an issue with coming up with a way to word and ensure that this money is being spent within our indigenous communities, which are, like across the nation, some of the worst hit by this epidemic. Just wondering if anybody would have a pathway to resolution in wording or in practice that might help us ensure that this money is being spent in the areas of the state that it needs to be.
Okay, thank you. Lynette, maybe when we get to your part, we could ask people if they have any experience addressing that, especially when it comes to the type of services that that Stephen was talking about.
Got it.
Garrett, do we have a next?
No hands at the moment.
Oh, there we go. We have one.
Hi, my name is Rita.
Hi, Rita.
Hi, I am a woman in long-term recovery. I have recently I'm coming to you from St. Cloud, Minnesota. I recently took a position with Wellness in the Woods, and they are an organization that is dedicated to reaching out to communities of color as well as frontier communities. And in our state, that means 7 people per square mile. So, very sparsely populated areas. My position is to be reaching out to the indigenous communities, especially in northern Minnesota. And I will say that when I say long-term recovery, I got here in 1978, and I often say I was a 15-year-old in a 30-year-old body. And in 1978 in Minnesota, we were treatment capital of the world, basically, with the Hazleton recovery community and all of that. What I have noticed over time, and the reason I am where I'm at today, is because just last May, I took the peer recovery specialist training through the peer academy, I guess, or recovery academy. And the reason I did that is language is changing. The language of recovery is way different than it ever was in my early recovery. I do recall saying at an AA meeting one time, very early on in recovery, I introduced myself as Rita. I am chemically dependent. Holy buckets, you would have thought the roof was falling in on these people. And I was told to shut up, which, I don't like to shut up, but I did. And I often think back to that time, and I think if I had been a different person, if I had had a different mindset, I may have walked out and never come back. I may have died of my substance use disorder. And so I am grateful to everyone who is working in the field, who really is trying to address the issues of racial equity in communities and in recovery spaces. I think it's extremely important that we become more and more inclusive rather than exclusive. And that is my goal in life, to always be inclusive. I love people. I love light, and I'm spreading love, light, and joy. So thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Who's next? Nick? I see a Nick up there. Who else?
Hi, yeah, Nick DeMott. I'm a peer recovery coach, coordinator at community center in Lansing, Michigan.
Welcome.
Part of why I wanted to come here, I actually just got back from the Multiple Pathways of Recovery conference in Florida. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that or with CCAR. Yeah, I mean, so my RCO is pretty new. We launched our community center back in October 2020. And you know, it's for me, like, trying to make our services and stuff accessible to as wide a range of people as possible has been important. But you know, we're a very like pretty much white hetero. I mean, it's probably evenly split male and female, but that's, you know, that's the extent of our diversity is male female. Like that's and I don't really, you know, I don't like, I'm somebody coming from like a cultural anthropology, sociology background. I mean, I have, you know, I believe in like anti-racist practices and all that kind of stuff, but how do I like, how to actually implement that in my work? That's not, I don't know. My, like, I mean, I have a board that I think is at least open to that kind of stuff, but like, you know, I mean, I'm kind of new. I'm not super experienced, so it's all really new to me, but you know, so we've had a lot of conversations in the office about this being something important to us, but then like, we just keep, you know, I mean, we're super busy. We're like brand new trying to launch all this different programming, but like, I feel like in some ways that's an excuse, right? If we just keep building out the programming. So that was a key point really coming out of the Multiple Pathways conference, is that, you know, like really like the sort of traditional medical model of treatment, the ideal candidate is pretty much like a white male Christian alcoholic, right? And to the extent that like we don't have any other options that are accessible and serve people, like, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that was tossed around there. I mean, you know, okay, like some overdose stats where overdoses look to be improving. I can't remember what specific city it was, right? Overdoses were decreasing if you look at the population as a whole, but if you break it down demographically among the, you know, Black and Latinx communities, the overdoses actually significantly increased, you know? So it's, yeah, I don't know. I'm a little just trying to figure out what do we do about this, you know? So yeah, thanks.
Nick, thanks for sharing.
Tom, we're going to have to wrap up your section so we can.
I was gonna pass it on to you. I think we've started talking about a number of BIPOC issues anyway. So how about if we just keep going with that? Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everybody for your input. We appreciate it. And some of you have already started talking about issues around racism and BIPOC communities, that kind of thing. I, quite honestly, would like to hear from some of the folks of color on the call tonight first, and then I'd like to hear from anyone regarding your experiences around these issues personally, either as a person of color or a person of culture that have had experiences within the recovery spaces or treatment spaces or prevention spaces or harm reduction spaces around, you know, these kinds of issues around access to services, or just an atmosphere of not being welcome or not feeling included. If you've had those any experience with that, please speak up. And then I'd like to hear from folks in the room who maybe work in those spaces and have seen those experiences. And what I mean by that is I do a lot of work supporting the work of peer recovery supporters. And I remember when last summer, has it been not last summer? God, it's been a whole year of summer. With when the social justice issues and the protests and everything was really, really high as a result of the murder of George Floyd. And we had a conversation at the state level with peer supporters, and just ask the question around, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How are things working with you and your clients or the folks you work with these days around are these issues coming up? And it was amazing how many people, both Black and white, who were peer supporters, admitted that the conversations never came up. And the reasons the conversations didn't come up were kind of varied, but they were also the same. Basically, there was a lot of fear around having the discussion. There were peer supporters, maybe peer supporters who were white, who were afraid to bring the issues up because they didn't want to be offensive, or they didn't want to get what they called written up. And folks of color who were peer supporters felt the same way. They didn't want to bring the issues up because they would be seen as maybe angry or trying to cause trouble. It was very disheartening. So I'm wondering, and this was a year and a half ago, wondering if people are still seeing any of those kinds of things in their communities. Those of you, I know some folks have mentioned that they don't, their communities may be somewhat homogenous, for lack of a better word, so they may not have a lot of folks of color or in their workspaces where they could identify these issues. But just wondering if anybody has any experience, either as a person of color having those personal experiences, or a person witnessing those kinds of experiences in their workspaces. Thanks.
I'm gonna Jerome and then Amber.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. This is a great conversation. My name is Jerome. I live in the District of Columbia. I am a person in long-time recovery, both from substance use and mental health. I didn't really get into my recovery until I was incarcerated federal prison over 10 years ago. And I have not had a drink or drug since coming home in 2015. So I work for DC Public Library. I'm a certified peer specialist and program support assistant for the library. My primary job is working with homeless and unsheltered individuals in the city of the District of Columbia. We have a very large homeless population in the city, and when the shelters, of course, not now during the pandemic, but before the pandemic, the homeless population would show up at the library at 9:30 when our doors open and would not leave until the doors closed at night. And so the library has found a way to welcome, but it has not been an easy road. We have some folk who work for the library who say, I'm a librarian, I don't have to deal with showing people who don't read or write how to operate a computer. That's not my job. And so also a part of my job is to talk to folks who are on staff to get them to see the other side, to show a little empathy and a little compassion for the folks who come into our buildings. I've been there this is going on my 4th year. We are seeing great success. We have great programs that most of the staff are happy to be a part of, the outreach programs, the equity programs. So I have seen both sides. I've been homeless and had to use the services of the library and have felt unwelcomed. And now I'm a person working there who is making sure that folks whose community I was a part of at one time feel welcome in our spaces. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Jerome. Appreciate it. Who else?
Amber was next.
Hi, I'm Amber Peace. I am way up in the middle of nowhere, North Idaho. I am a person in long-term recovery. I've got over 20 years clean from cocaine was my drug of choice back then. I am a recovery coach and peer support specialist. I also coordinate all recovery services for our recovery community center here in Latah County. One of the biggest struggles that I had kind of grown up here when my mother remarried and we moved to Idaho from Southern California was when I got a very, I don't know, it was a very interesting time. I was in 4th grade and I moved to an area that was very white. And I'm Italian, French, and Portuguese. So I was really confused when I was not accepted at all. I got called a great many negative slurs, didn't have a lot of friends in school. And so I turned to drugs because I didn't fit in anywhere. When I decided to get clean, there was nothing here. And so it's been really amazing to be able to, leave the area. I went and found my tribe out in the world, and I was able to come back here and help this recovery center grow. We've been open for 6 years, and it is still a very, very white kind of area with very, we'll call it historically white-minded, I guess would be the way to put that, in the sense of there's a lot of people here who it's not a racial issue so much as it's an uneducated or underexposed kind of scenario. And so one of the things that I try very hard to do is gently educate my community on, ooh, hey, maybe we don't say that and maybe we say this instead. Because I live in a dual college area, so we get tons of college students here, and I run into some of the weirdest statements that I have ever heard. And so we have a conversation of, does it really matter if I was Black or if I was Mexican or if I was Native American? Why does it matter to you so much to use that disclaimer? Why can't I just be the crazy chick that you met on the street that day? And that's one of the easiest ways I found to have that conversation. To this day, I still get people asking me about my heritage. Where are my people from? Are you Black? Are you Mexican? Are you Native American? And it's in, like I said, I've had the gamut of racial slurs because I am what I am. I'm a hodgepodge of European stuff that came into America. That's what I am. And so I think it's important to remember that when we're educating people about being aware of race and culture, to be aware that they're still people, and it's important to address them as people, not by what color their skin is. We work with addicts. I mean, we know that occasionally they will come in and they won't be the cleanest human being. And we're there to accept them, meet them where they're at, and help build towards that positive future for themselves. And if that's what we're here for, we get to lead by example. The community starts looking at us for that example to lead. And beautiful, beautiful things can happen in a community when you do.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you.
There was a comment in the chat, and I'll just read it. It's a question comment, but from Laverne, who's a person of color, and regular traumatizing microaggressions, white people allowing their discomfort to avoid receiving the truth of my experience as a Black person, and expecting me to teach and train them versus them doing their work.
Yes. Thank you, Laverne. Amen. Amen. Great comment. Anyone else want to share anything? Have any comments? I think I saw
Michael, and then go from Michael, Karen, and then Debbie.
Okay. And if you don't mind, I'm mindful of time. So if you could keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes, that would be awesome. I appreciate it. We want to get everybody's comment in.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Michael, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. I'm really excited about hearing what others have to say, but already my interest has peaked to a comment that was shared about, in particular, access to medications for the Black communities in particular, buprenorphine and others that is very challenging to get, especially right now with COVID-19 has really changed the whole landscape of those communities. And certainly, as we look at the opioid overdose epidemic, it's really has since 2019 been a real difficult challenge for the Black community in particular, because the dying has increased. I think it's like 35% over the last 2 years, more than any other ethnic group. So the demographics has changed with the opioid overdose epidemic. But more importantly, I just want to say that I personally have a concern with, the marginalized communities that, once again, from the front end of the criminal justice system to being released from prison and understanding that the monies that look at this, billions of dollars now have been, this is more money than we ever could imagine right now for opioid overdose and use. But our communities still, the Black communities are still struggling. And I just need to say, Dr. King said, there's a quote Dr. King said, which he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Our nation is crippling the Black communities because that's where the struggle really is now. And so I just want to say, if we can take a look at how we can bring more monies into those communities to have more people even take an opportunity to get access to recovery, that would be a real big help in the midst of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments. Who's next, Garrett?
Karen, yes.
Good evening. I just want to validate Laverne's comment in the chat, and especially her comment in reference to individuals, all individuals, doing the work. And just so that I can be better than brief, there are numerous research papers on implicit bias, disparities in healthcare, fragility, trauma. And when we look at trauma, access to healthcare and parity, access to housing, access to food, all of the social detriments are a form of trauma, and disenfranchised communities historically suffer the brunt of that. And when we talk about the medical field, social services, and the Department of Services, oftentimes there is a lack of diversity that is reflective of the inclusive community. And it almost ends up being a form of apartheid. And in order to do the work, you have to be able to look at the data, and the data speaks for itself. The data will speak for itself, and you have to decide where you stand on examining yourself and where you fall in that data, and being willing to cross over a line and say that I want to do some additional work. I want to be continually curious and engaged, because when I'm continually curious and engaged, I learn and I'm able to do my job even more effectively. So I'm going to pause on that. However, the data, the research, which is the data and the research, which is objective, not subjective, exists. It's up to each one of us as an individual to say, who am I and what am I contributing to perpetuating this, or what am I willing to contribute to reduce this, so that ultimately we're able to provide the services for all individuals that are seeking and attempting to maintain recovery and move forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, and I don't want to, I hate to do this, but I'm going to, if we can take just one more person, because I don't want us to not have enough time to do the third section of our event. So if one more person has comment.
I see
please.
Debbie's hand is up.
Hi, everybody. My name's Debbie. Thank you for doing this. Wow. I don't know what to say, but I'm Debbie, and I'm an addict and alcoholic, and by the grace of God and set of principles, been sober since June 12th, 1984. And, but I only have today. My heart is breaking because, oh, let me go fast. When I was in school, people didn't know if I was black or white, because my skin color was just as black as a black person, but light enough. I don't know. But anyway, what bothers me now when I go to AA conferences is like 100 people, and probably maybe 3 black people in that conference, and it's heartbreaking. And here at my apartment complex, it's like everybody wants to know, what race you are. And it's like, are you black, white, Indian, da, 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 da. And just for the hell of it, and I really don't know. I haven't done any DNA stuff, but I said I'm black. And it's like, oh no, you can't be black. And it's like, well, how do you know? Because my skin is dark. I mean, but whatever. And the N word is being a lot, and then the housing, it's like they're supposed to get a team thing together and to work with residents to bring every, make it more of a community. This was back in July, and I ain't heard nothing since. So I'm working on the letter for housing authority. And thank y'all. This gives me courage, Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments. Thank you to everybody. I wish we had more time. Sounds like a subject that we need to delve more into at a later date. We're going to go on to the final portion of our evening before we close. Stancil Tootle is a member of our Inclusivity Caucus, and I'm going to bring him to the mic to introduce himself and to ask this question. Excuse me.
Okay, hang on, make sure my camera on. Where's the button? Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Stancil Tootle, and I am a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that it has been over 31 years since the last time I found it necessary to use any mind-altering, mood-changing substance. I live in rural Southwest Georgia, and as y'all can tell, I am a Black man, and I'm also blind. I've been blind since birth. I have congenital cataracts. I'm a 3rd generation. I got some children blind, some grandkids blind, and nieces and nephews, and a great grand that is also blind. So it's cool being blind. And I also have a speech problem. So I got the trifecta: black, blind, rural, but I beat the odds. And one of the first things that I would like to get you to start thinking about is how many disabled people have you seen or that you know that participate in the recovery settings wherever that you go and receive your recovery services from, or where you pro- provide recovery services. And I'm willing to bet that the number is small. Part of that, I believe, is due to the fact that accessing treatment for people with disabilities is very, very limited. Or so if they can't get access to the treatment, odds are they definitely won't be able to access the recovery services. People with disabilities are the largest minority group in this country. So you would assume that we should be visible in all spaces if things were truly equal. And I, I just like everybody else for about the past 2 years we've been hearing about all of this diversity and equity training and stuff. And in most cases, they only deal with the race or the gender. And for someone like me, that only serves part of me. But I call that the low hanging fruit. Uh, I believe that general society is fearful of disabled people. And I also think that part of that is because y'all can join me and my peers at any moment. But yet at the same time, um, if you truly gain long-term recovery, you're going to probably join me anyhow. And I want you to think to yourself that if you want to become disabled with a physical or sensory disability, would you still be able to participate in the whatever recovery program you currently participate in or that you currently run? Uh, and odds are that most programs aren't truly equitable because there is no effort put in to make sure that people like me can participate. And usually I hear things like, well, I never thought about that. And that is a cop out, because the average person in a week's time, you're gonna see you're gonna see at least one disabled person. But I tell people all of the time, y'all look at us, but y'all really don't see us, because there's a difference between looking and seeing. And seeing requires taking time to really observe us. But if you just look, you look and you move on. And uh, the the numbers say, and Mr. Michael, uh, the gentleman that spoke during the last section, when he was talking about how there is a real problem with what's going on in the Black community, that same issue is also going on in the disability community. And so if the individual is Black and disabled, they get a double whammy. And usually when programs are created, they only deal with part of that individual also. There's a whole lot of talk going on right now about harm reduction, but people like me or my peers aren't necessarily included in those discussions because a whole lot of disabled people, for whatever mobility or access issues, don't hang out in the dope trap. But Medicare says that last year they paid for over 43,000 emergency room visits for overdoses. And for those of you that don't know, Medicare is one of the primary insurances for disabled people. So when you all get to splitting up the money that's coming for harm reduction, I hope some of you all be willing to implement some programs that will target that population that is not seen in the dope trap, but they are still overdosing. And like I said, my question that I would like to ask you once again, if you couldn't see, or if you couldn't walk, or if you couldn't hear, would you be able to still participate in whatever recovery pathway you participate in now, or would you still, or that you administer or you work at right now? And
thank you,
how many
Stancil.
other,
I want to give
last
folks
question.
a chance to answer, Stancil.
One last question about that. How many peer supporters do you all know who are disabled? If it's about peer, I should have a blind person to talk to.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Thank you, Stancil. I love hearing you talk. I just want to give someone a chance to answer before we have to, I want to be mindful of folks' time. And if you don't mind staying over a few minutes, we would love to get a little conversation in on this. But that's a powerful question, Stancil, powerful. I thought I saw
Toodle.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Toodle.
Lynette, no one's hands was raised, so Toodle could, well, there we go. We got Mr. Jerome.
Yeah, I thought I saw a hand.
Right.
He just raised it.
Oh, he muted himself again. Go ahead, try again, Jerome. Can you unmute? There. No, you did it. Let's try one more time. Yep, you got it.
Cool. Stancil, that was great. I'm happy to say that in the District of Columbia, we have great accessibility. I'm a member of the peer support group here in the District of Columbia. We have over 350 members, some of whom have disabilities. The lead lawyer for the Accessibility Project is a member of our group, and she is in wheelchair and is partially paralyzed, all that. And also, the library where I work has the Center for Accessibility. When I'm at Maine Martin Luther King Library 3.5 days a week, I'm in their space every day because there's some person there who needs help with housing or needs help with filling out some applications or whatever, and that's what I do. But your question is spot on. I do know that there needs to be more expansiveness, and especially when it comes to monies being divvied up, there needs to be more folks in the council chambers and in the state houses, making their voices heard. But not only the disabled folk, but those who are family members, those who work with those folk can also participate in that space. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to just point out, someone put into the chat, Amber noted in the chat that her center works very closely with the Disability Action Center. They currently employ 3 peer support specialists that are both in recovery and have disabilities. This is a huge issue. Stancil, someone else says there's often an overlap in mental health, addiction, disability, homeless. So Toodle, I think you have raised some really, really important issues, and I thank you so much for doing so. And just in closing, right quick, I want to say it is my hope that once the DEI training subcommittee can review tonight's discussion and to come up with some recommendations, perhaps for future conversations. Sounds like this conversation's not over, is what I'm trying to say. But I am so grateful for everybody's contribution, for you showing up and sharing what you were feeling. I wish we had more time to delve further into these issues, but this is only the beginning. So thank you all for participating. I want to conclude by introducing the chair of our Inclusivity Caucus, Ms. Carol Cruz.
Thank you, Lynette. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Stancil Tootle. Thank you, everyone that have participated with us on Facebook Live. So if those that didn't get the notice, didn't get the memo, this was actually our kickoff, the Inclusivity Caucus kickoff for 2022. And Toodle was the person why we had this listening session and why we wanted to put this out here on social media. And again, like Lynette said, we are going to have many conversations around this. I had recently just came from a Faces and Voices of Recovery listening session on DEI. It was their 6th session, and it was based off of MLK's quotes. And so again, I want to thank everyone that took the time out to come in this evening. My name is Carol Cruz. I'm a woman in long-term recovery. My pronouns are she and Aya. I am on the Chewebi land here in the Southern Nevada in Las Vegas. I am not a West Coast girl. I'm an East Coast girl. But I'm here as a director of education and training working for RCO. And also, as Lynette said, I'm the chair for the Inclusivity Caucus. We have a lot of trainings and information that we will be providing in this year. And I just want to let folks know that we did put in the chat. So if you're interested in more information around the Inclusivity Caucus or would like to join the Inclusivity Caucus, our next meeting will be February 16th. February 16th or 17th. I'm sorry, I don't have my calendar in front of me. But if you send your information to that link that we put in the chat, we'll make sure you get out the information when our next meeting is. It is going to be a training meeting. We have Sherry Hampton from California, who is going to be training us around the topic of racism in recovery. And again, we have to start uncovering these really uncomfortable conversations. We don't know what we don't know, but we have to start to be learners, doers, and teachers. And we need to continue repeating that: learner, doing, teaching, and teaching others and teaching our communities, so we can break down these barriers and we can break down these walls of systemic racism especially in recovery spaces, and how we're not reaching the folks, as Toodle mentioned, with folks that have disabilities, that folks that don't look like us, right? We need to, or does look like us, marginalized communities where we addressing LGBTQIA communities as well. So with that, I just want to leave us with an MLK quote. And it was actually the last quote that we spoke about tonight. And excuse me, just take me 1 second to get to it. So if you can fly, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. I'm calling you all forward. I'm not in that place of wanting to call people out, but if you're not doing something to make the changes, then you need to be called out. But if you are in this arena, on these platforms with us, and you're ready to have these uncomfortable conversations, but not just talk about it, but let's put it into action, then we're calling you forward.